I'm Huon Hooke, and this is The Real Review. So the wine we're tasting today is Bangor Jimmy's Hill Pinot Gris 2018, which comes from the east coast of Tasmania. So let me tell you a little bit about the Bangor property. It's not a well-known wine label on the mainland of Australia, much better known in Tasmania, but it's one of a collection of properties along the east coast of Tasmania where vineyards sprang out of very long established farming properties which go back to the 19th century. So the Dunbabin family, who own Bangor, which is a large property which has a lot of native bush on it, they're very interested in conserving the native bush, has a tiny little 4-hectare vineyard. And that's only a recent addition, considering they go back right back to the 1890s or earlier on that property. But like a lot of people along that coast, they decided to plant some vines when wine became much more popular in Tasmania. It's down, if you drive from Hobart to Port Arthur and head out along towards the Tasman Peninsula, you probably go close to the Bangor property. It's not far from Brim Creek, which is also quite a well-known vineyard. That area, a place called Dunalley, came into the headlines a few years ago and had a terrible bushfire in 2013. And the people at Bangor were fighting that fire for 3 weeks. And who will ever forget those pictures of people huddling in the water to try and escape the smoke and the fire during that terrible fire? And that fire actually burnt part of their property. It burnt a lot of their sheds, it burnt a lot of their fencing, but luckily it didn't touch their vineyard. I'm not sure they made much wine that year, but the 2018 vintage is a cracker, no problem with that. They've been running that place since the 1890s. There are, I think, 3 generations of the Dunbabin family who are working side by side right now. And they've done well in the last few Tasmanian wine shows. I've been chairing the Tassie Wine Show for 15 years or so, and the last few years their wines have been coming up really well. This wine won a gold medal, I think. Their Pinot Noir won Wine of the Show this year in January 2020, and their sparkling wine also won a trophy this year. So really, really good vineyard, obviously, and quality winemaking by the local contractor, which is Tas Vintners. So let's taste the wine. The colour, it's quite a light straw yellow colour, which is pretty typical of Pinot Gris. This wine has not been fermented in barrels, whereas there is also a Jimmy's Hill Reserve Pinot Gris that they do, which has been barrel fermented, which is a more complex wine. But this is more of the everyday drinking style. Spicy, touch of lychee, a little bit of minerally character there. Reminds me of beach sand, that sort of iodine-y character you sometimes get. But the lychee and spicy tropical fruit aromas are very typical of Pinot Gris. And the wine is soft and round and silky textured. The acidity is there, but it's not obvious. It's beautifully balanced for drinking. It's an anytime wine. You can drink that with or without food, but it has plenty of structure and plenty of weight, and it would go with quite a lot of different foods. It's not sweet either. It's not overtly sweet. A lot of the less expensive entry-level Pinot Gris are quite a little bit sweet, which I think is not a great thing usually. But this wine is lovely and soft, and it avoids both austerity and overt sweetness. It's a really nice drink. So what else can we say? Good length, good aftertaste. I do recall when this wine was first released, in fact it was before it released, I think it came up in the Tassie Wine Show, and it was less than a year old, and it was really, really austere and young and closed up in its shell, and it didn't even get a medal. But now it's done very well. It's come along beautifully in 2 years, 2.5 years. And it's just a great example of how it's very hard to judge a wine that's very young sometimes, and cool climate wines especially need a bit of age before they come into their own and show their true qualities, and that wine really has. And how did we rate this wine this time around? It got 95, which is a gold ribbon score, and it won a gold medal at the Tassie Wine Show, as I think I mentioned. And it was rated number one out of 26 Pinot Gris from Tasmania that we tasted from the 2018 harvest. So very, very big achievement for a $29 wine. Yeah, really, really good drinking now. I think it's a wine to drink young. Despite what I said earlier about it needing a bit of time, I think it's in the zone now and will hold that nicely for the next 3 years. But I wouldn't recommend keeping it too much longer than that. So we asked the winemakers, who are the winemakers at Tas Vintners. I'm not sure which particular winemaker wrote this, but he or she likes drinking this Pinot Gris with fresh flathead, which they catch themselves at home, so they must live near the water, tossed in panko crumbs with salt and pepper, then shallow fried in vegetable oil with a bit of butter. And who could go past that? I think that sounds like a very good match indeed. The fish, flathead's a flavoursome fish. It has a bit of richness to it, a bit of fishiness to it, which would go well with this kind of full of flavoured dry white. It's got a bit more grunt to it than your average Sauvignon Blanc or Semillon. I think that would be a very good match with a wine like this. So, good health.